So here we are, Hailie, at the desk. Hailie Deegan, everybody.
Hello.
And they told me I had to show up here, that you had questions for me, that you were going to interview me. Yes. So I'm ready.
Yeah,
I studied all night. I studied Kyle Petty all night, so
yes,
I
yes.
to get the answers.
Man, it's just looking back at your whole family, your heritage. Yeah. There's so much history just within your family and within my family too. I feel like there's a lot of history, sure. And so it's cool seeing us to be able to be relatable with that. But I was wondering, like, what are some cool things you guys do together, or some past stories that are pretty funny that no one else may know?
Okay, so when I was growing up, see, you can relate to this. When I was growing up, my dad and I rode motorcycles all the time. I got my first motorcycle when I was 6.
What kind of bike was it?
Yamaha.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, it's fine.
Okay, I want to make sure. I don't want to step on toes. So I got my first motorcycle when I was 6. So we rode motorcycles when I was growing up. That's what we did. Every afternoon after work, on the weekends, I rode all the time. So I went from 2 wheels to 4 wheels. Did you go from 2 to 4, or did you go from 4 to 2?
So I grew up, when I was just, because it's a family household thing, I knew how to ride a dirt bike growing up. That's kind of just what I messed around on. Between that, little kind of UTVs, smaller ones, stuff like that. But I originally started racing on 4 wheels, dirt, and then transitioned into 4 wheels, pavement. But so I stayed away from the 2-wheel thing because my dad figured this 5'4" girl wasn't going to have the best career on a dirt bike compared to these other guys. There's a better opportunity for me in the NASCAR world.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. Look, I grew up watching my dad race. Obviously, Brian Deegan, who was the guy. The God, the freestyle guy, you know, this X Games. So what was that like? I mean, I know what it was like growing up with Richard Petty. We'd go to the racetrack. Everybody wanted an autograph. He was the guy, and you were like 3 steps behind like this, you know. What was it like growing up with Brian? It's
funny because I never saw my dad as different. I never saw our family as different. I thought it was normal. I thought that was the everyday life of your average little girl growing up. And I didn't really notice it until my dad would take me shopping at the mall. And he would get stopped every 10 feet. And I was like, oh my God. Like, I was like, Dad, I just want to go shopping. Like, come on, like, why are you stopping for these people? And then now I realize that I'm like, he had to stop for those people. Like, I would have stopped for those people. But did you ever have like a realization moment?
Yeah, we were, and I told this the other day to Dale Jr. on his download. I think I was in the 2nd grade, and we went to a racetrack in South Carolina, and it was the first time I realized that everybody's family didn't have a race car. I thought everybody had a race car. I thought everybody just had one next door in their shop, and everybody went racing. And I took a kid from elementary school with me, and he was just amazed at. There was Richard Petty and Bobby Allison, David Pearson, all these guys. But same thing, you talk about walking through a mall with your dad. We used to go to dinner, and you'd go out to a restaurant, and everybody would stare. They just stare while you were
They don't say anything,
they just stare. They just stare. So we had a bad habit, myself and my sisters, we had a bad habit of balancing spoons on our nose and just turning around and staring back at them. And we got in trouble all the time for that. Because, I mean, if you're going to stare at us, we're going to stare back. That's kind of the way it was. But you just get used to it.
It's like when someone drives by you on the freeway and they look at you, so I like specifically look over and make sure I go the extra mile to look over.
That's right. That's right. If you're going to stare at me, I'm going to stare at you. That's the way it works.
Exactly. But it's cool just how relatable we can be on different things like that. But how old were you when you started racing?
So, my dad would not let me race until, as I was growing up, they swore, until you're 21. You're not going to be able to race till you're 21. But they finally, my parents conceded the fact that I was going to race at some point in time. And I raced, started when I was 18. Ran the ARCA race at Daytona that you just had a great race in, ran 2nd. So I ran the ARCA race at Daytona. It was my very first ever race, stock car race, any kind of race of any kind. My dad, we had cup cars, and my dad said, if you can get that one ready, we'll go to Daytona and race. So we worked on that one and got it ready, and I went to Daytona and
they
drove
just
a race
threw
car.
you on Daytona.
Threw me on Daytona. Think about that.
That is
Think about just throwing on Daytona.
I couldn't even imagine that, because like some of my stock races, it was in Madera, California.
Yeah, cool,
almost like it's tiny, almost a quarter-mile track, and it's crazy to think that you can just be thrown on tracks like Daytona, but you obviously can't now because of all the requirements there with it. Probably a good thing.
Yeah, it's probably a good thing. Okay, so let's go back. So they put you in a stock car, and was that just a few years ago? Just
I was
a couple
15.
Yeah. So you jump in a stock car and they throw you on a racetrack with a bunch of guys. How intimidating was that? Because look, and I say that from the standpoint that I went from Daytona running an ARCA race to Talladega to run a Cup race was my next race. And
You're just going to the heavy hitters.
Yeah, and I went from racing ARCA to racing against the legends and the Hall of Fame guys that are in there now, because they were the guys that were winning races when I came along. So you went from this to just jumping in. That's a pretty deep end when you jump to late models and jump into asphalt race.
Yeah, and it was such unknown territory for me. And going to the stock car races, and I know that I race against majority guys. There's maybe a few girls here and there at the racetrack, but my dad growing up, he never treated me different. He never made me feel different. He never was like, oh, you're a girl, you're doing good for a girl. When I went out there, he's like, why are you second? Why are you 2/10 off? I'm like, I don't know, Dad, but we're going to figure it out and I'm going to win. And so it's funny because he holds me to such a high standard. And I hold myself to such a high standard because of that. But going to all these stock car races, and the more you move up the ranks, and especially if you start rushing it, you're racing against these guys with experience. And even talking to Kevin Harvick at one of my first K&N races at Kern County when he was there, I just had a conversation with him. I was like, I'm just going to go talk to him. Why not? And so after talking to him, he's like, one thing you can't compare to is experience. It's hard to beat someone who has years and years of experience, and all these younger drivers that are getting to the Cup Series that are in their 20s, young 20s, have to compete against guys that have been there for 15 years, and it's hard to beat that experience.
I guess I look at, and I've grown up in the sport, and this sport. You grew up in the sport also. In motorsports, because everything that has a couple of wheels on it and a handlebar or a steering wheel, that's motorsports. So you grew up in it, and we've always looked at it, I think, as I don't care 5'4",
5'4", yeah.
5'4", 6'2", 780 pounds, 85 pounds. It doesn't make any difference.
85 pounds, so I was like 5.
It doesn't make any difference. It's all about what you get done on the racetrack. So when you look at it and you strap on a helmet and you get in the car, you're just a driver. Is that how you look at yourself?
Exactly, 110%. And I think that's going back to what we were talking about, why my dad put me in car racing, is because he saw that I could be equal there. He saw it was fair game.
Great
that
point.
If I put in the work, that it's going to show. But in dirt bikes, it's a little more physical. It's more physical than stock car racing. And so it's going to take a lot more out of me. I know everyone's like, oh, but Ricky Carmichael was 5'4". I'm like, well, he's still a guy. Guys are built a little more beefy, and they're not necessarily about 120, and it's just it's a little harder when girls getting thrown around on dirt bikes. So I think we definitely went down the right path, but we'll see where it takes us. It's always fun.
All right, so let's go to the physical aspect of it. And you talk about the physical aspect of dirt bikes. I've seen you win a couple of races getting physical. Is that just your nature? Do you feel like you have to be that way, or to show the rest of everybody, or that's just how determined you are to get that checkered flag?
So I grew up in the racing world, off-road racing. If you ever have watched the Lucasville Off-Road Series, which it is utter chaos.
Yes, it is.
I grew up in this world of aggressive racing. If you were in second and you're within a couple car lengths, like, you're winning the race. You already know. Like, in the last restarts, if you're starting on the pole, like, you know you're not winning that race. It's just you're sitting duck. And so I always was super aggressive, super up on the wheel. I grew up from the age of 12 being one of the having the target on my back of like, okay, let's go out there and beat her. And it was a crazy experience, and just to have that be the base and foundation of my racing career, it almost took me past the level of aggression of stock car racing. So I'm trying to learn patience, and that's something that I've never had.
So you're dialing it back.
I'm dialing
You're
back.
dialing it back, which makes sense. Which does make sense.
Exactly. And so also I feel like that's why I've been able to have success as a girl in stock car racing. Not many girls have been able to have, and is because a lot of girls' personalities, they're a little more quiet, shy, softer personalities, not very aggressive as guys are. And that's just naturally, it's just how you are. And it's hard to push someone kind of forward,
Yeah.
but it's easier to take them back.
Yeah, it's easier to pull back.
Exactly. So my aggressive personality, it works for stock racing.
See, I'm just a cool, calm guy. I've never been
I'm
aggressive.
pinned 24/7, and everyone's like, "You need to chill out." They're like, "Lay off the pre-workout." I'm like, "I can't."
What else you got for me?
Yeah, I'd
Anything
say.
big?
Well, are you big into social media? Do you feel like?
Well, here's what happened. Yes. Yes and no. I love Twitter. I love
See,
Twitter.
I don't like Twitter.
So why don't you like Twitter?
Okay, so Twitter is more conversation. I would say it's not so much pictures and videos as Instagram, stuff like that. But everyone's so negative on there.
Yes, they are.
If I
Yes,
want to
they
get
are.
ripped apart and feel horrible about myself, I'll go to Twitter.
Yes. And that's why I love Twitter. and that's exactly the reason. Twitter may be one of the most negative places on the planet.
Yeah.
If you want somebody to abuse you and kick you and slap you, go to Twitter. The problem is I kick and slap and abuse.
You're one of those guys.
So it's like, okay, let's bait them. Let's bait them. So I'm a little bit on Instagram.
Okay.
I do a motorcycle ride across the country every year, the Cow Pity Charity Ride. You need to come do that. Your dad needs to come do that.
Yeah.
My gosh, man.
Hey,
so
waiting for the
yeah,
invite.
bring the whole family, man. So my dad rides with me. So we do that. So Facebook, I have a Facebook account and stuff like that, but I'm not as into social media as you guys are. You know, just sitting there watching the Ford drivers and watching you guys go through media training and do that. How important is that aspect of it to your career? Now, this is what we did. We showed up at the racetrack with a helmet.
Yeah.
We had a uniform.
Yeah.
We
You
got
were
in
a
a car.
racer. Yeah.
We got in a car and we drove a race car. Now you guys, you show up, you have your helmet, you have your uniform, you have your phone, you have your computer, you have all this stuff that you have to be a part of so that Ford wants to be associated with you, so Monster wants to be, so all your sponsors. So how time consuming is that for a young driver?
It's very time consuming. My screen time on my phone is between 9 and 11 hours a day, which I didn't even think I was up that long.
Wow.
But I feel like social media, it's definitely optional in the racing world. You don't have to have it, but it could benefit you a lot if you do. And one thing that I like being able to do as someone who's grown their social media and done it all myself, except for like our YouTube channel, which obviously someone has to video that with us, is I liked growing it so I could tell my story my way.
Yes.
Because the one
Great
thing
point.
is, people in the media, reporters, interviewers, they're always looking for that next headline. They're looking for the drama, conflict, what gets attention. And what gets attention is conflict.
Yeah.
And so if you're always trying to find something conflicting in your life, you're necessarily not showing the positivity that you want to, or the vibe that you want to give off, or say there's something that you want to talk about, but they necessarily won't pick it up. It's a way for me to tell my story my way and attract fans because of that and be real about it, not be fake. I can't stand fake people.
Yeah.
I am brutally honest. Brutally honest.
That's good. That's good.
And because of that, I've told some stories on social media that have blown up bigger than I thought they would have when I'm just bored sitting around. I was like, you know what? I feel like telling the story right now. But that's why I like social media. I need to get more into Twitter, though.
All right. That's good.
Yes. But I'd say if there's one moment in the history of NASCAR, which I've been trying to learn more about the history of NASCAR just because I didn't grow up in the NASCAR world. I grew up in the off-road racing world.
Yes.
You ask me anything about Baja off-road racing, I don't know that. But NASCAR world-wise, what's the most intriguing moment that you've either experienced or been around or watched?
That's a great question.
So many.
Well, no, it really is. I think when you go back, because I have I've been around a long time. Listen, I was driving before your dad was born, so I've been around a long time. So I think if you look at it, you know, I think for me, I've been very, very blessed to be in the sport and to watch my dad and to watch the guys that are already in the Hall of Fame right now. And then to start my career at about the same time that Earnhardt Sr. started his career, and to still be here when Jeff Gordon came along, and still be here when Jimmy Johnson comes along, and still be so. And I'm a little bit of a bridge from, I was a kid like you going to the racetrack with your dad, when the greats raced, when these greats raced, and then I raced against this group of guys. So for me, the most intriguing part of the sport is to watch how the sport has evolved, to watch how the cars have evolved, how the technology has evolved, how the drivers have evolved, how the fan base has evolved, how TV has evolved. It's crazy to think we used to run to go to Wilkesboro and places like that, and there'd be 10,000 fans, and 35 or 40 cars. Now you go to the racetrack and it's a 38 car field, and there's 50 or 60,000 fans, and it's on TV, and 2 or 3 million people watch it. It was a totally different sport. So that is, to me, that's the most intriguing and most fascinating part of the sport, and how it's grown. So that's pretty good.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way, just because you've been around it all.
Yeah.
You've been around decade after decade to see these drivers come up.
So you're saying I'm old.
No, I'm not saying
yes,
you're
you are.
old.
Yes, you are. You're being brutally honest.
A decade after decade, that's 20 years. 2 decades right there.
All right, there
So
you go.
you've been around it. You've been around it to see so many great drivers, their highs and lows.
Yeah.
And in NASCAR world, I feel like there's a lot of highs and lows, but it's crazy to think about all the history that's behind it.
So when you look at the sport, and you're new to the sport, so you see it with fresh eyes, and I always love to talk to people who come to the sport with fresh eyes. So you've been around, you've followed it over the last X number of years. Who do you think that you pattern yourself out after as a driver on the racetrack? And maybe not off the racetrack, but when you sit in that car and you think, this is the guy that I feel like I drive most like, or that I feel like I most emulate on the racetrack?
I get asked that quite often, but I never am able to pinpoint just one.
Just one.
I like
never
little
could
things.
either. I never could either.
I like little things about multiple drivers.
Yeah.
I like Jimmy Johnson because back when we had the different format with the championship, you saw the consistency paid off.
Yeah.
Carl Edwards, you saw consistency worked. But now that's changing a little bit. You see the more aggressive guys like Kyle Busch. That's when they come into play, and it changes the aspect of what makes a championship-worthy driver.
Yeah.
And so there's little things. I love when Kyle Larson runs the fence. There's always like that. It's like, I'm like, yeah, I want to be like that.
Yeah.
But there's just so many great drivers, and Kevin Harvick, he's always there. He's always in the front. You can always count on him. If I ever need someone that's like a trustworthy pick for the race, I'm Kevin Harvick.
Yeah.
And so there's so many great things about so many great drivers, and they all are different, and they all have different things that I could take away, kind of take what I like and build my own driver, and hopefully eventually be.
And that's good, because I was the same way. I love the way that Bobby Allison did certain things when I was growing up. I love the way my dad obviously did a lot of things, and that was my main focus. So let me go to this. Let me ask you this, because Earnhardt's Dale Jr. and I talked about this a little bit the other day too, is Dale Jr. is not Dale Sr. And I came along and I was not my dad. Has it been hard not to be in that shadow? Because there's a shadow.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, has it been harder for you, or have you even noticed it?
Me and my dad, we get along very good because we have the same sense of humor.
Yeah.
Same laugh, same exact laugh. Sounds like Squidward from SpongeBob, everyone says. But we've always got along because we're so much alike, and we have the same work ethic. But our personalities are a little different sometimes. He's a little more hardcore. I definitely I want to make it fun. Let's make it funny, which he's getting more into that with the social media and stuff like that. He always wasn't like that back in the day, but now he's getting more into that. But my dad, he's such a hard worker, and he puts so much work into every aspect of his life, and he makes sure he does everything right. And so I wouldn't mind being like him. But it's crazy to see him just want to see me succeed. It's just, there's so much work that goes into it, so many pieces of the puzzle, but it's all hopefully aligning.
So I saw him come down off the pit box at Daytona after you won. So here's the question: bigger fan? Is he a bigger fan or bigger critic? Ooh.
Bigger critic, for sure, 110%. He is the first one. I'm over here just excited. I'm like, okay, we just got second. Like, obviously, I would have loved to win. I'm kind of, I don't want to say I'm glad I didn't win, but if I would have won the first race, everything else would have been downhill.
The bar's up here.
When you're up here and you can't go any further, it's only downhill. And so I talked to my driving coach about that, and he's like, it's probably a good thing you didn't win. I'm like, but like, we could have won. It's
we
winning
could have.
Daytona.
That's right.
That's such a historical thing that could have happened. But he was the first one to tell me what I did wrong and what I needed to work on. And after Phoenix, first one to tell me, well, you shouldn't have pitted. I'm like, well, Dad, I didn't know we were going to go under caution for 12 laps. And so there's little things that he's definitely critiques me, but I know he wants to see me succeed.
Good. Good.
But yeah.
You got anything else?
Okay. Final question. We'll wrap it up. What are the requirements to get me on Coffee with Kyle?
That's a great question. You know what? So here's what has been so fun. Oh, here's my requirement.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Ready.
So I've had Tony Stewart,
Okay.
Mike Helton,
Okay.
Roger Penske, my dad and Dale Inman.
The bar is set very high.
Yes. Jack Roush is on.
Yes.
So I've had Jack Roush. So here's the thing. You just go win Daytona.
Go win Daytona.
Go win Daytona.
Is there?
Go win Daytona.
I'm gonna go back and race the ARCA race every single year.
Go win Daytona, and you'll get on Coffee with
Okay.
Kyle. No, I will say this. It would be an honor to have you on Coffee with Kyle because this has been a lot of fun just chatting because I think we have a lot more in common just from the way we were raised, from the way we grew up, having fathers who were superstars and heroes to a lot of people. It's a different way, and it's your normal and it's my normal. That's just the way it is.
That's what we grew up around.
I enjoyed this.
Yeah, me too. So hopefully we could carry on this conversation and Coffee with Kyle, we'll see.
Or a monster with Hailie. How about that?
Yeah, I'll take it. Perfect. We'll start our own.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Hey Motorsports fans, thanks for watching. Make sure you hit subscribe before you go for all the latest news and highlights across motorsports.